top 5 serial killer nurses from Britain. Based on recent news around Lucy Letby, I wanted to investigate similar acts of terror by other medical professionals in UK. With these stories, I wanted to understand how widespread these issues are within the medical fraternity. I believe the impact of these treacherous actions by those who are trusted to take care of people does irrevocable damage to our society. Most, if not all, of these killers used their medical training to apply key medical procedures to carry out their evil deeds. Now I want to talk about 5 individuals who are nothing but pure evil. In all these, let's not forget that medical professionals don't become killers. It's killers who become medical professionals and misuse the training to harm others. Number 5. Jesse McTavish, the original angel of death. Jesse McTavish was the first known registered retired nurse turned killer. She was born in 1940 in Scotland. McTavish worked in Ward 5 at Glasgow's Russell Hospital. She was convicted in 1974 for the murder of an 80-year-old woman, Elizabeth Leo. It was alleged that she had injected soluble insulin into the patient, causing her death. She was also accused of harming further 3 patients, injecting them with similarly harmful substances. Upon inspection, one of her patients had inexplicable quantity of pethidine in their system. During her trial, colleagues of McTavish told the court that they saw her inject one of the patients with an unnecessary quantity of phenobarbital. She had also made no record of the injection. Her reason for doing so, according to her colleagues, was doctor likes them to go quietly. Multiple doctors testified that McTavish often gave patients injections without recording these events in the patient's case notes. During the investigation, she had admitted to the police that she had indeed poisoned the patients with overdose of insulin. But during the trial, she retracted her statement and claimed she had only injected the placebo. McTavish was jailed for life in October 1974, but in 1975, she successfully appealed. Apparently, even though there was ample evidence to support her conviction, the court agreed that the judge at the time of her first trial had misled the jury when he failed to inform them the fact that McTavish denied admitting to the police that she administered insulin to kill the patient, and she was acquitted. Even though she was prosecuted for only one case, it is possible she may be responsible for another 23 suspicious deaths. McTavish's case is often mentioned in lectures at medical colleges in Britain and is cited in textbooks and academic papers about forensic science and medical malpractice. And the next person on our list is said to have been inspired by Jesse McTavish. Number 4. Colin Norris. Colin Norris was born on 12 February 1976 and brought up in Milton area of Glasgow, Scotland. He originally worked as a travel agent after leaving college, but after a few years, he decided to change his career and retrain as a nurse. A noble cause on the face of it, but some believe that he didn't have the right temperament for it. Nurses or medical professionals in general need to be patient, compassionate, and gentle. They deal with some of the most vulnerable people physically and emotionally all through their careers. Their jobs aren't easy by any means. Colin Norris was, by all accounts, quick to anger, quarrelsome and aggressive to his tutors at the university and later to his employers as well. His behavior towards university lecturers at the University of Dundee was described as unacceptable. Shortly before he qualified, Norris learned about Jesse McTavish as part of his course. Norris was tasked with reviewing her conduct by his tutor. It is likely he did use his learnings about Jesse McTavish as his inspiration later on in his career. Her acquittal might have made him think he could get away with murder too if he was careful enough. He began working in Leeds after graduation in 2001. But as was his habit, he had a falling out with his superiors. He didn't like being told what to do. He disliked working on minor injury cases or older patients. He wanted to be in the emergency wards, working on more quote-unquote exciting cases. He especially disliked working with elderly patients. His colleagues heard him complain that he didn't want to work with that type of a person, referring to the elderly. Something minor such as an elderly patient throwing bed covers off could cause him considerable anger. Police would later discover that Norris had repeatedly mistreated elderly patients in the early months of his nursing career at the same Leeds hospital in which he would later go on to murder patients. First time someone suspected him of murder was when he predicted a patient's death while he was working at Leeds General Infirmary, only a year after qualifying as a nurse in 2002. One day, he told a fellow nurse, "I predict at 5:15 a.m. Ethel Hall will become unwell." He said he had a feeling about her that she was going to go off that night. Ethel Hall was admitted to the hospital for a broken hip. There was nothing in her medical history to suggest that she had any other serious health conditions which would cause her death. Hall fell ill around 5 a.m. that morning and died a few weeks later. His first reaction when he was told was, "I told you so." A blood sample was taken from Hall after a doctor raised concerns and ordered blood tests. Her blood was found to contain an inexplicably massive amount of insulin, about 1,000 units in just one sample, and this became the main evidence in his case later. Hall was never prescribed insulin as she had no condition which required the medicine. Around the same time, they also noticed that 2 vials of insulin went missing from the storage, and Norris was the last person to access it. Norris immediately came under suspicion. They decided to investigate further 72 deaths in the wards where Norris was working. It was decided 18 deaths needed further investigation. In the end, they found the same lethal dose of insulin in 3 more patients. All 3 were female. They also identified 2 more victims, one who had also died of insulin poisoning and another who had survived a massive overdose. Along with Ethel Hall, none of these women were diabetic, and all of them had been admitted to the wards for broken hip. Even if they were diabetic, the amount of insulin he was injecting would have been lethal. When questioned about so many deaths under his care, Norris's response was, he was just unlucky over the past 12 months. The first 3 incidents occurred at Leeds General Infirmary between May and July of 2002, where he injected patients first with morphine to make them drowsy, then administered high doses of insulin. Then he was transferred to St. James's University Hospital, where he started his attacks all over again. It is believed by the time Hall was killed, Norris had become confident he could carry on killing without being caught, since blood tests that would have revealed they had been given overdoses with insulin had not been taken. So when he killed Hall, he didn't expect them to investigate the death, which finally led to him being caught. It came out during the trial later that his co-workers did notice that insulin would go missing every time a patient of Norris's died, and these deaths had followed him from one hospital to the other. Norris was convicted by a majority verdict on 3rd March 2008 for the murder of 4 women and the attempted of a 5th. He was sentenced the following day to life imprisonment and ordered to serve a minimum term of 30 years in prison. There is more. A BBC Panorama investigation came up with the conclusion that all the evidence against Norris was circumstantial and heavily reliant on expert evidence. The deaths could be attributed to a rare condition called insulin autoimmune syndrome. Are you familiar with this case? And most importantly, do you believe that it is possible he was wrongly convicted? Then how do we explain the missing insulin and him being the last to see them alive, so to speak? After his arrest, his ex-boyfriend said around the time when Colin Norris started the killings, he was obsessed with the British drama series Holby City, in which a nurse goes on a killing spree using insulin on her patients. The same storyline from Holby City is said to be the inspiration for the next killer on our list. Number 3. Benjamin Jean. Benjamin Jean killed 2 people and committed grievous bodily harm to 15 others while working as a nurse at Horton General Hospital in Banbury, Oxfordshire between 2003 and 2004. Born in 1980, Jean was known at Horton General Hospital as a nurse who always looked for action. Despite the fact that his post was in the minor injuries unit at the hospital, he would often leave his post without authority to work in the emergency department. See any similarities with the previous killer? It seems both of them considered working on minor injuries beneath them. They were made for better things, more exciting things. He was a self-acknowledged thrill seeker and enjoyed adrenaline rush of working in the casualty department on life or death cases. In other words, he enjoyed the control he felt he had on another human being's life or death. I've heard them referred to as code blue junkies in America. He had been warned by the hospital managers many times for turning up at emergency when he was not assigned to work there. He was told many times to stop drifting from the minor injuries unit where he was posted, which he of course ignored. There is no record of any actions being taken against him for this insubordination. Between December 2003 and February 2004, 18 patients treated in the hospital's accident and emergency department suffered respiratory arrests or depressions, while Jean, a trainee nurse, was alone with the patient. Originally, these patients had all been admitted with only minor complaints such as dislocated shoulders or other mostly non-life-threatening conditions. Yet suddenly, they found themselves fighting for their lives when they were treated by Jean. None of them had conditions which could lead them to respiratory arrests. 2 of those patients died in January 2004. Anthony Bateman, aged 65, and David Olney, aged 75. He also administered drugs like midazolam and the muscle relaxant vecuronium to other patients he was treating. None of these patients were prescribed these drugs. As a result, they would have caused dangerous harm to individuals who had no medical need for these drugs. Because of the potentity of these drugs and their very specific medical needs, there are set procedures in hospitals. Every use needs a prior approval, and usually they place restrictions on who is authorized to use them. So when they discovered potentially lethal drugs in the patient's system, they knew someone had tried to poison them. One time, a fit 22-year-old had also fallen into respiratory arrest for no apparent reason when treated by Jean, as well as a woman who only came to the hospital for a minor stomach complaint. Another patient who had been admitted after drinking a bottle of gin and taking painkillers stopped breathing after Jean gave him an anesthetic he did not need. First red flag came when a 67-year-old woman who had come with a dislocated shoulder was treated by Jean. In the guise of changing her morphine bag, he tried to poison her and she went into respiratory arrest. Later, when she made full recovery, she was able to describe the events in minute detail. What Jean didn't know at the time was she was a former nurse herself. After this incident, his colleagues began to notice it was always when Jean was on duty and attending patients that people were falling unexpectedly ill. Also, he always automatically knew why they were ill and what to do to remedy the situation. He once even boasted to a doctor, "There's always a resuscitation when I'm on duty." An internal investigation before the 2 deaths had occurred initially identified 25 patients who had experienced sudden respiratory arrest or failure under Jean's care, but 9 were discounted before administrators alerted the police. Jean was arrested as he arrived at the hospital to work on 9th February 2004. He had on his person a syringe with the potentially lethal muscle relaxant vecuronium, despite it being strictly forbidden for staff to take such drugs out of the hospital. The same muscle relaxant had been given to David Olney, one of the patients who had unexpectedly died on Jean's watch. Jean claimed that he had accidentally taken the syringe home in a pocket of his scrubs after a hectic day. However, the syringe and needle looked to be heavily worn, as if it was used a number of times. As we all know, syringes are disposed of after a single use in hospitals. The jacket he was wearing was tested, and the pocket was found to not only contain vecuronium but also traces of midazolam, the drug which was known to have been illegally administered to some of Jean's patients and which had caused them to go into respiratory arrest. Jean was formally accused of 2 murders and inflicting grievous bodily harm with intent to kill 16 patients. On 18th April 2006, Jean was found guilty of 2 murder charges and of intentionally inflicting grievous bodily harm on 15 patients. On 9th May 2006, Jean, then 25-year-old, was given 17 life sentences with the recommendation that he spend at least 30 years in prison before being considered for parole. Jean, of course, maintained his innocence and vowed to appeal his conviction. Jean's case was reviewed by lawyers and volunteers from the London Innocence Project. Jean's barrister has stated that there was a major miscarriage of justice. Mark MacDonald, founder and chair of the London Innocence Project, has stated that he believed the case against Jean was manufactured to fit the circumstances. Jean's family believes he is a victim of a witch hunt by officials. Tell me you haven't heard all of these same statements in the case of Lucy Letby. The only miscarriage of justice, according to me, has been done to each and every one of his victims. When colleagues noticed that whenever patients unexpectedly fell ill, Jean was around, they nicknamed him Ben Allett, last name of the next serial killer on our list. Number 2, Beverly Allen, aka Angel of Death. Beverly Allen was born on 4th October 1968 and grew up in the village of Corby Glen near Grantham in Lincolnshire, which is also the birthplace of Margaret Thatcher. There were signs in her childhood and adolescence that suggested something might be not quite right with her. She had a habit of making up stories and lying to people when there was no need. She also pretended to be ill and visited the GP frequently, wore bandages and makeshift casts on pretend injuries, and would never allow them to be examined. But she liked the attention she got whenever she visited the doctor's office, and they made a fuss about her. She left school at the age of 16 and took a course in nursing at Grantham College. Reportedly, she was not a good student, didn't quite get the grades she needed to be qualified as a nurse at first, due to her poor attendance because of various fake illnesses she came up with. But somehow, she managed to get a job as a state-enrolled nurse in 1991. This could be because of staff shortage and shortage of qualified nurses at the time. She started working at Grantham and K. Stephen Hospital in Lincolnshire. Between February and April 1991, she was suspected of murdering 4 infants and attempting to murder 3 others and causing grievous bodily harm to a further 6. She committed the murders as a state-enrolled nurse on the hospital's children's ward. Allen administered large doses of insulin to at least 2 of her victims, and a large air bubble was found in the body of another. But police were initially unable to establish how all of these attacks were carried out. Again, can you ignore the similarity in Lucy Letby case? Is it a mere coincidence? My imagination? What do you think? Allen had attacked 13 children, 4 fatally, over a 59-day period. It was only following the death of Becky Phillips that medical staff became suspicious of the number of cardiac arrests on the children's ward, and police were called in. It was found that Allen was the only nurse on duty for all the attacks on the children and had access to the drugs used. She was charged with 4 counts of murder, 11 counts of attempted murder, and 11 counts of causing grievous grievous bodily harm, Allen pleaded not guilty to all charges. On 28 May 1993, she was found guilty on each charge and sentenced to 13 concurrent terms of life imprisonment, minimum sentence of 30 years before being eligible for parole. Among 4 killed, there were 2 two-month-old twins, Becky and Katie Phillips. Becky Phillips was admitted to the ward for gastroenteritis on 1st April 1991. She was administered with an insulin overdose by Allen and died at home 2 days later. Katie Phillips, the twin of Becky, was admitted as a precaution following the death of her sister. She had to be resuscitated twice after unexplained collapses, following the second time where she stopped breathing. She was transferred to another hospital, but by this time she had suffered permanent brain damage, partial paralysis, and partial blindness due to oxygen deprivation. During their stay at the hospital, her parents had been so grateful to Allen's care of Becky that they had asked her to be Katie's godmother. It is said that she suffered from the mental illness Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a desire to kill or injure to get attention. The sentencing judge told Allen that she was a serious danger to others and was unlikely ever to be considered safe enough to be released. Rather than going to prison, Allen was incarcerated at Rampton Rescue Hospital in Nottingham, a high-security facility mainly hosting individuals detained under the Mental Health Act. She became eligible for release on parole after her minimum tariff of 30 years ended in November 2021. It is speculated that Beverly Allen may have inspired next person on our list, one of the most prolific serial killers in recent British history. Number 1. Lucy Letby. Lucy Letby, born on 4th January 1990, is a former neonatal nurse who attacked at least 13 infants in her care between June 2015 and June 2016, killing 7 of them. Her birth was complicated as she herself was a premature baby, and she had told her friends that she was grateful to all the nurses who aided her mother during the birth, and one of the main reasons for her to become a nurse herself. Letby pursued her education in nursing at the University of Chester, where she also worked as a student nurse during her 3 years of training, carrying out placements at Liverpool Women's Hospital and the Countess of Chester Hospital. Letby was the first member of her family to study at university and graduated in September 2011. Letby began working as a registered nurse at the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital in 2012. Let's look at the timeline of events as they unfolded. Letby's first victim was Child A. On 8 June 2015, Child A was born 6 weeks premature, along with his twin sister, Child B, and was days old and healthy when he was handed over to Letby when she took over the night shift. 30 minutes later, his health deteriorated rapidly. He died within 90 minutes of Letby coming on duty that day. Attempted murder of Child B. Between June 8th and 11th, Letby injected Child B with air about 28 hours after murdering her twin brother. She survived after being resuscitated. Subsequent tests showed gas-filled bowel, a finding later replicated in several babies over the following year. Murder of Child C. On 4th June 2015, Child C was born 7 weeks premature, weighing 800 grams, but was in good condition. Letby was seen standing over his monitor as his alarm sounded, despite not being his designated nurse. He died as a result of air being injected into his stomach. Murder of Child D. On 22nd June 2015, Letby injected air into Child D's bloodstream, causing her to collapse 3 times in the early hours of 22nd June. Her third collapse was fatal. Those attending noticed a discoloration on the baby's skin that was strange. On 2nd July 2015, Dr. Stephen Breary, the head consultant on the neonatal unit, carried out a review of the 3 unusual deaths in June. Alison Kelly, the director of nursing and deputy chief, was told that Letby was the only nurse on shift for each of the deaths. No action was taken, and Letby remained on the neonatal unit. At this point, Letby herself had no idea anyone suspected her or that they were looking into these deaths. Murder of child E. On 4th August 2015, child E was born 7 weeks premature along with his twin brother, child F, and weighed less than 1.4 kilograms. His mother reportedly walked in on Letby trying to murder the newborn after arriving on the unit with his milk. I'm not sure if she realized what was happening at the time. He died after suffering a fatal bleed believed to be the result of Letby interfering with his nasogastric tube. Attempted murder of child F. On August 5th, just a day after, not satisfied with killing his twin, now Letby targeted child F. She laced child F's feeding bag with insulin less than 24 hours after murdering his twin brother. A blood sample later confirmed extremely high insulin levels and very low C-peptide levels, proof he had been injected with insulin. Attempted murder of child G. 7 September 2015. The most premature of all babies in the case. Child G was born 15 weeks early and weighed just over 450 grams. Letby tried to kill her 3 times over 3 weeks. The first time on the day of her 100th day alive. Child G, now 8, is severely disabled as a result of the attacks. Horrific. I don't even know how else to describe it. Second attempt on child G happened on 21st September 2015 at around 10:15 a.m. 5 days after child G returned from another hospital where she had been taken following an earlier attempt to kill her. Letby again tried to take the little girl's life. This time she was suspected of harming her while feeding her at around 10 a.m. Murder of child I, 23rd October 2015. This one was described in court as persistent, calculated, and cold-blooded. Letby killed child I on her 4th attempt after inserting air into the baby girl's stomach. The nurse later sent a sympathy card to the child I's parents on the day of her funeral. No one talked about if these children could feel any pain as these atrocities were done to them. They were too small and frail to make any noise or even cry out. Oftentimes, there were tubes going in and out of them. I really hope that they didn't feel any pain. It is unbearable to even think otherwise. On 23rd October 2015, Dr. Grear became increasingly concerned following the death of child I. Another staffing review found Letby was present at more unusual deaths. Another consultant doctor, Dr. Ravi Jairam, also raised his concerns to the management, but they were told not to make a fuss. Letby remained on the neonatal unit. On 8 February 2016, a review was ordered by Grear, found several common links in 9 unusual deaths since June 2015. Letby's connection to the mortalities was mentioned at a meeting called to discuss the report, which was sent to the medical director, Ian Harvey. Grear requested an urgent meeting with the executives, but no meeting took place until May 2016. Between 9th April and 3rd June, she attempted to kill 3 more babies. Dr. Grear at this point was still trying to convince the hospital managers to take Letby off the unit, but they refused, stating there is no evidence whatsoever against Letby other than coincidence. After this point, between 3rd June and 24th June, she harmed 1 more child and murdered 2 more, her last victims being child O and child P. On 23rd June 2016, Letby murdered the first of 2 triplets, a day after returning from her holiday in Ibiza. Child O had been a perfectly healthy baby and was due to go home when he collapsed unexpectedly. Postmortem X-rays showed a higher than normal amount of gas in his body. Letby murdered him by injecting air into his nasogastric tube. On 24th June 2016, shortly after killing child O, Letby turned to his days-old triplet brother. Allegedly, she pumped air into the baby's stomach via his nasogastric tube while feeding him milk at around 6 p.m. 13 minutes after his brother had died. Experts believe this excess air shattered the little boy's diaphragm. Doctors tried to save him, hoping he will make a full recovery by moving him to another hospital, but that was not to be. All this while the hospital managers kept protecting Letby. They even made the doctors who complained against Lucy Letby apologize to her face to face. Dr. Ravi Jairam, one of the doctors who believed Lucy to be the killer, told in an interview how he was forced to apologize and he had to sit opposite Letby while she arrogantly asked him if he was happy to work with her when she came back. On 24th June 2016, following the unexpected death of child O and child P, Dr. Grear called the duty executive, Karen Reese, on the evening of February 24th, on the evening of Friday, 24th June 2016, to say Letby had to be removed from the unit. Karen Reese insisted Letby is safe to work with, and then she was happy to take responsibility if anything happened to other babies when Letby was involved. I wonder where she is now. Will she and the other hospital management who protected Lucy Letby, who are still trying to put the blame on the doctors who raised concern, where are they now? They should be standing next to Lucy Letby facing charges of their own. There are countless videos on Lucy Letby and her wrongdoings on the internet. If you are interested in more details about how she was finally arrested and investigated, please do refer to them. 30th June 2016 was Letby's last nursing shift on the neonatal unit. She didn't lose her job, but was moved to an administrative post while the investigation was underway. 7th September, Letby registered a formal grievance procedure against her employers. Around this time, Royal College of Nursing Union informs her by letter about the allegations surrounding her involvement with a number of deaths. She was arrested 3 times between 3rd July 2018 and 10th November 2020. As I read the countless reports, every effort was made to eliminate Letby as the suspect. But in the end, there was no explanation but to admit that these little lives were deliberately sabotaged, and Lucy Letby was the only common link between them. A police search of her home revealed evidence of her campaign of horror, including handwritten notes. In her bedroom, they found hospital handover sheets stuffed in shopping bags. In total, 257 confidential medical documents were recovered, many related to the baby she had hurt or killed. In court, she tried to explain this by saying she collected paper or the documents had accidentally ended up at her home. Her Facebook data revealed that Letby repeatedly searched for her victims' parents. This included on Christmas Day or on the anniversaries of the infants' deaths. She denied in court she was obsessed with the grieving families. She even sent sympathy cards to some of the patients whose children she had murdered. During the trial, Dr. Jairam told the court, "We were getting a reasonable amount of pressure from senior management at the hospital not to make a fuss." On 22nd August, Lucy Letby was given a whole life-term sentence with no chance of parole for the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 more. It is said that she was motivated to kill as she desired attention from a married registrar she was allegedly having an affair with. She has always denied this allegation and said she was only good friends with the said doctor. I felt, at least in this case, NHS Trust prioritized its reputation over patient safety when they ignored repeated concerns from duty doctors who are appointed to treat these babies. In every interview they gave, you could feel their frustration and helplessness. I feel for those doctors. I have no words for the families of these victims. In every single case, when they had to sit through the trial and listen to what was done to their babies, parents, grandparents, 1,000 apologies would never be enough. And that brings an end to today's video. As always, like, share and subscribe. Leave a kind comment and share your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Until next time.